Hello, and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly and hopefully lively look at all matters property designed to be of interest to someone who has an interest in property. Property Matters is supported by Fairview International and also, of course, by Town and Country Property Auctions London. So, from LTVs to landlords, property's never far from the news, is it? Let's be honest. And we'd love to have your comments, please, on the video that you're watching right now. You can comment underneath on any of the items that Joe and I talk about today. Or if you'd like to send us an email, you're more than welcome. propertymatterstv@gmail.com. And as I mentioned, as always, on a Sunday, we're joined by our resident property expert, Joe Joshi. Joe, good morning.
Morning, Paul. First day of spring.
Indeed.
So the daffodils are out. Funny enough, the sun is out too. It's all excellent news. One of the hot tips for today, of course, is don't forget to do your census, or there is £1,000 fine. So, all the hot tips come here on Property Matters. And of course, they're all related because it might actually mean that's a month's worth of mortgage for somebody. So don't forget to get online and deal with your census today. But yeah, lovely day. And of course, the best time for property always is spring. It's a historical time. Going back 40 years, I was always taught and told that if there's going to be movement, that's the window of opportunity is springtime, when the gardens are beginning to look just right. We had the first lawn cut this week, which was good. I like the stripes in the lawn. It always makes you feel better. It makes you feel even better when you haven't done it yourself, Paul. And
I was just going to say to you, actually, I rely on Property Matters for my own personal lifestyle advice. Yet last week you advised me to cut the lawn, and this week you're telling me to fill out the census.
Fill out your census. That's right. That's right. Well, we like to keep you all informed and appeased, of course.
Indeed. And just to let you know, we're delighted that Bob is joining us, who was with us last week, because Bob gave us some fantastic advice last week as our mortgage specialist. Morning to Bob as well. And great to see you watching and joining us again. And obviously, we'd love to have Bob on another day, wouldn't we, Joe?
Absolutely. I think I was just literally speaking to Paul off air, Bob, and saying that how useful your advice was last week, and I will certainly pick up on some of those points later in the program, and would love to have you on board another time.
Fantastic. So, also first day of spring, but pretty much the end of the first quarter. And I was wondering, from your experience, because you're out there, at the coalface each week, what's been your experience of this first quarter? Has it been as vibrant and as frenetic as the punters or the pollsters would have us believe?
There is definitely a spring in the air, and a spring in most people's step, Paul, as the nicest way to bring that into the time of the year. And I think all of that has been given comfort by the fact that, a lot of people have had their jab. And it's quite amazing to see the number of pictures that are posted when someone's had their jab. It's almost like a sense of relief. And that kind of gives them the license, I suppose, or the feel-good factor to think, I'm okay. I'm now invincible, and I can get out there and do the things that I've long wanted to do. And that relates greatly into the subject of the day that we deal with and discuss every single time. It's giving people that energy, that surge, that want and that wish to do the things either to their home or about their home or about their lifestyle and changes. And it's certainly things that we will cover throughout. But yes, there's no doubt in my mind that, that sort of vigor, that interest is out there. And people want to buy their home. They want to own their home. That's the way it is.
Let's take a look at some of our news this week then, Joe. And we've got some interesting points to raise with everyone this week. We reported on this story with Bob last week, funnily enough. It's about the disconnect between the buyer and the seller demand. Everybody, basically, what they're saying is everybody wants to buy and everyone's very reluctant to sell. It appears following the budget announcement and the kids going back to school, suddenly everyone said, right, now's the time to get on with moving. And in the week to last Sunday, buyers rose 1% in that week, whereas new vendors dropped 14%, landlords fell 13%, and tenants fell 8%. Now that's quite a significant drop, particularly when the buyers are quite solid. So surely this is not helping the Chancellor. It's just fueling the prices, isn't it?
I think the answer there, Paul, is that look, the Chancellor is going to be at the end of the gun, because someone has to take the blame for what is in the market and in the news for house property. But the way I look at it is, as a layman on the cold face, is that we've all had to take stock of our lives. Circumstances have changed. People have lost loved ones. There's a whole bunch of things that have happened in the last year. And to be honest with you, it's almost to the year, to the date. I think it was yesterday, as a matter of fact, that the lockdown was announced. And if you actually look at that and think, really, was it a year ago? I mean, has it really happened that way? And in that year, so much focus has gone into people's minds about their own life, their families, the way we live, the way we think, what we eat, whether we walk, whether we talk, all of those things has been quite a soul-searching journey. And I think that's partly what's happening right now. I don't think it's got anything to do with the Chancellor. I think that we've all taken stock. And of course, it's nice to see the kids back at school. And people are probably focused in thinking, right, I've got that done now. That's ticked off the list. The kids are back at school. I've got to deal with other issues along the way. And those issues could be the things that are making people stop and think whether they are ready to go to the market just yet. On the other hand, the Chancellor has issued and dished out some goodies out of his little shopping bag, and that is he's offered 95% mortgages, government-backed schemes, obviously an extension in the stamp duty period to the end of June. And that then drives the market for people to think, well, actually, this is my window of opportunity to step up. So it's just finding that balance of what people are going to do. It will come. I think it's just at the moment that sort of your graphs would come. The dip in the graph would show that people don't want to put their houses on the market yet, but they don't probably want to put those on the market because they're just sorting their lives out after having a year of ups and downs. So things like having the vaccine, things like kids going back to school, then the structure of work, travel itself. I mean, the roads are amazingly busy. I mean, you'd think nothing's happened here.
Yeah, I've noticed that myself.
All of a sudden, the whole is so people are moving around, and their priorities are probably not sitting at home thinking, "Shall I put my house on the market just yet?" It will come, and I think those are the real, in my humble opinion, those are the real reasons that we just got so much to sort out and so much direction to do. Of course, it's going to reflect in the way we do, and statistics. And it's interesting to say that I'll just bring that census subject back on. But part of the reason they want all of that is to learn, how are we moving? What are we doing? This is really, in theory, Big Brother watching. So they've done a great job. Obviously taking us out of the pandemic. We're working towards it. Look what's happening in Europe. It's carnage right now. But at the same time, they've now collected a lot of data. They collect the data because you go in and get your vaccine. They're going to collect your data because you now got to do the census, and that will give the government the tools that they need to understand how they're going to deal with the purse strings, or the purse, should I say, of the government going forward. I think those are more the reason than what the Chancellor's done.
Sure. What's interesting is traffic to the websites, to the websites from buyers, is 38% higher than even 2 years ago, Joe. So take out the stamp duty element of it, the traffic is still almost it was over a third higher than it was 2 years ago, which is quite something. I've got as you might expect, I've got a lovely little graph for you this morning, Joe.
I was
And
missing
I
that,
just
Paul.
wanted
Really.
to show you, because on this, if you can see that, hopefully you can see that, there's a red line and a blue line. They're the only ones you need to worry about. Now the
Yeah,
seller line is the red line and the buyer line is the blue line. And if
yeah,
you look, you can see the stamp duty holiday is the dotted line along the top in the yellow section, right at the top right hand corner. You can see the stamp duty dotted out there. Um,
yeah,
and if you look at when the light sort of orangey colour, there's the pink and then there's the light. So the beginning of lockdown is basically the orangey section, and you can see there that sellers were much higher than buyers. No one was interested at the beginning of that, and then all of a sudden you get to the situation whereby you've got the stamp duty holiday, and pretty much throughout that process, right the way down to Christmas, you can see that sellers matched buyers. And indeed, as we came out into the third lockdown, much the same. But if you look now, what's happened in this last few weeks is the fact that the sellers have dropped off a cliff on the graph there. And that's something I think that surely that the chancellor would be looking at, and maybe even the agents are looking at the estate agents, because that's a really big difference and shift than I would say. What do you think it is that's putting the buyers off, the sellers off rather, from selling?
I don't think I don't think it's actually anything putting them off. I just said to it earlier on. I think they're just reconfiguring and structuring the way they're thinking. We made some, I suppose, rash decisions during this period of the lockdown. We're thinking, do I move out of town into the country and so forth. And then there's been a lull of buyers coming from international. So, there's been a shortage of the buyers that make this. It's a ripple effect, Paul. So if you look at, for example, central London, those buyers that come in internationally come in from all over the world, which we haven't been able to get in because obviously we're not allowed to travel. Those buyers haven't been buying the London properties. The London properties then sold are generally a ripple effect to the outer counties. So where we are and what I've learned over the years that some parts of West London will travel down the M4 and some parts will travel down the M40. And of course, out of the other side, Surrey area, they'll go down the M3. So that ripple effect hasn't happened as well as we want it to do, or has happened during that period. Now, I think most people are just taking stock, and that shows in the graph that there is lesser properties to sell, and there are more buyers. There are more buyers primarily because of the offerings that they've now got. They've got the opportunity, and it's the best time. One of the best times to buy is right now, primarily because all of a sudden the facilities, the 95% mortgages, the help to buy schemes, the no stamp duty. I mean, it's 15 in London. It's up to £15,000 worth, and it's a comment that Bob made last week. Can you imagine the saving of a stamp duty of £15,000 for a property that you would buy in London is equivalent to the £15,000 that you would put as a deposit for a property in the north of the country? And all of a sudden, and no stamp duty to pay. Well, when you take something like that on board, I think it's really valuable to think that ripple effect is going to go out further. But I think it's just where we are in our sort of mental cycle that says to us, we've had this pandemic, we've had this, the last end of supposedly the most amazing magical word that we had in the last 4 years of our life, which kind of seems to have disappeared off the screens nowadays. And all of a sudden we've got something new to look forward to, and the new is how do I move? How do I do it? So I think your graphs actually mirror the feelings of the people and the mood of what the country is doing and taking stock of their lives, as opposed to what statistics show, that there is a lull in the marketplace and there is a positivity. In another month's time, I'd love to see that graph, because I think you'll find that there will be people moving again. They'll get stock. Don't forget that there are phases of this lockdown being open. I can't imagine the number of funny jokes that I've seen coming through when the bars open, and how people are excited to go out to out to the local bar, and the queue and the rush. There's a local bar near us who's done an amazing job. You know, he's got these domes and bubbles and so forth out there, and to comply with everything possible. So people are excited, and the longer days make another set of difference. Don't forget, when it's dull and dreary and dark in the winter time, and you're all stuck indoors, you have a different strategy. But right now, the focus is probably get outside. I mean, a day like today, they're probably around the park. That's the way you got to see it.
I'm guessing also
I think those are the real differences.
I guess there could be an element of the fact that this was just about the time of the budget, and therefore there could have been some people not wondering whether they were actually going to be able to make it through in time, perhaps something like that. Got some comments here, Joe. Suki says that uncertainty is preventing people from selling. Also, Bob says buyers are sitting tight, focusing in on coming out of the pandemic, schools and summer breaks. But an interesting point also from Guy Charrison here. Guy says, and if traffic is 38% higher than 2 years ago to the portals, take into account that the stock levels are so low as well, and therefore views per house must be at a very, very high point. In other words, a lot of people going to see a few properties. It's a good point from Guy.
Well, thank you, Guy. I really appreciate the fact that you've even given me the time to look in. Guy Charrison, ladies and gentlemen, is, I suppose, one of the reasons that I joined the auction world. Guy is the auctioneer for a company that I first joined. He's been in the business and around probably as long as I have. And so very valuable, and really appreciate your input, Guy. Always valuable advice. But yeah, I agree with him that it is exactly as he says. There are a number of people viewing is much higher, and then it's the case of converting those views into the actual sales. So good point.
Bob also made the same mistake I made, which he said it's the seller sitting tight, not the buyers. I did the same thing earlier. It's easy done. No worries. Thank you for that.
Can't get staff days, that's all I can say.
Indeed. CGT, which often came up last week. It's come up a few times because it was rumoured that all of this that we're going to talk about now was going to be in the last budget. It's now rumoured that it's going to be in the autumn statement, and therefore it's time to get your skates on. And if there was a good reason for sellers to just get rid of that, sorry. If there was a reason for sellers to get on with it, this is the time, because particularly if you've got a second property, if you're in the buy-to-let landlord marketplace. Buy-to-let landlords and second homeowners could see CGT raise by up to £24,000 on your sale if recommendations by the Office of Tax Simplification are introduced. So currently CGT for your main residence sits at either 10 for basic rate taxpayers or 20% for top rates, as most people I'm sure will be aware. And then on the investment properties, it's 18 and 28 respectively. But the OTS are basically saying that they want it to be in line with income tax, so 20% for low rate and 40% for higher rate. And at the same time, lowering the initial exempt amount to just £2,000. So that's a pretty tough pill for the buy-to-let landlords to swallow, Joe, isn't it, really? Because at the end of the day, they're already pretty much taxed up to the hilt. But it does seem that the government sees this as an opportunity for people who are no longer saving money in financial institutions, but realising that they can get the returns in property. They're determined to have their share of your prosperity.
Absolutely, Paul. Look, I think, first of all, it is sad to see that the government would even think or contemplate on giving you a CGT, a capital gains tax levy on your own home. You've already paid the tax to buy that, and you've paid the tax when you bought it and paid it in stamp duty, and you've continued to pay it in your income. So I think it's, I'm sure that I would have a lot of people supporting the thought that should be zero. And to the best of my knowledge, it was always zero, because it's your own home and you shouldn't have that. And there shouldn't be any reason for the government to put their hand out on a capital gains on your own home. That's for starters. In terms of the buy-to-let market, and of course the capital gains that they may consider taking, yes, there are going to be people that are going to currently turn around and say, this is my time to sort of bow out, sell up before they do that, and I'll make a gain, and I'll make a saving. But take this on board. That's what I would say. Is the saving greater than the good of what you're getting from the return of that investment? And at the end of the day, that payment you're going to make is only, on my understanding, and I'm not a financial advisor, I'm just going to give you this as a view, but I think it is only on the crystallization of the property. So it's only when you actually sell it that you are likely to want to have to pay that capital gains, because that's what capital gains really should mean. The capital tax is based on the gain that you make. But if you don't sell it, then the government isn't entitled to it until such times as you do sell it. So, in the old days, the best way to do was, if you really wanted to do that, is probably consider, refinancing it, refurbishing it, extend it, put the money that you would probably normally have paid to the government back into the property by refinancing the property, and therefore having a lesser equity in the property that is likely to be taxed. And you could raise that money to do a number of things. Some of it could be to improve the property, and some of it could be to assist your children in helping them having a deposit on the properties that they want to buy. So I'm sure where there's a will, there's a way in order to do that. And the government obviously have got a job to do in terms of getting their money back in as quickly as they can for all the money that they've been spending during the pandemic. And so they are going to look at those things. But one side, it's the old story, the Lord giveth with one and taketh with the other, And here we are, that, there's giving it by not charging stamp duty in central London and so forth areas, which could be, anything from between 15 to 200,000 pounds in some cases, depending on the value of the home, to those that are not going to have it on the other side. So I think, it's just a balancing act that they've got to do, and the balancing act that we do. In terms of investment, Paul, I think, I've always said on our program here, and I'll continue to say that time and time again, if there was another vehicle that people felt comfortable in and assured and got a return on their investment, I assure you, as we would say, the silver hair brigade will probably not want to get involved into property and talk about leaky taps. I just can't imagine, what is the worst thing there? But what do? When you get a return sitting on your money in your bank account, which is lower, and no banks had the foresight to say, hang on a minute, this money could be sitting here for the next 15 years if I gave them a good return, then of course they're going to cash that money in and invest in the one and only subject, the only thing that gives them security, surety, and return. Security, because they can touch it, feel it, and see it. Return, because they know that they can get a better return than sitting in their bank. And of course, the surety is that it's there. It's not like a stock market and some blokes are handing you money for you and it goes down and he says, oh, well, it says in the caveat, your money's not safe. That's not what people want. People want to know what it is. And that's one of the reasons in the 40 years that I've been in the business, I found that the people love property because they love the fact that they like to be able to touch it, see it, feel it. So yes, on one side, there's given the benefit of the stamp duty, and the other side, there's talk. I'm not saying that it's there, but there's talk of the CGT. My only thing on CGT would be that it shouldn't be on your own home. But yes, of course, if you're going to make a gain, they want to make a gain, and that's the way it is.
So Suki says the CGT proposal is going to create panic if it goes ahead and a rush to dump investment properties. And that's a good point, in that I wondered, Joe, whether that's actually the government's intention. They're not happy about so many people stockpiling properties in small companies to provide, a nice retirement income for someone. They'd rather they go to first-time buyers. So if they do create a panic sell to get rid of stuff that's not going to perform as well any further, then that does help their ambition of having everybody as a generation buy, not generation rent.
Of course, and this generation buy and generation rent is an important plan forward, because I think it's important that all our children are able to get onto the first run of the property ladder, and of course normally it's supported by the bank of mum and dad in order to do that. In the days that we did it, and certainly I did it. There was no support because mum and dad were not in a position to deal with those things. So, but today, house price, the average house price across the nation is, I think, nearly £300,000. I mean, when I look back at the first house I sold, which I'm sure if Guy is still joining us, he will know that it was £34,000 in Hayes, and that same house was £650,000 recently. So, house prices have continued to go on that basis, and that's very important to have on board. And I think the government scheme to obviously make it a generation of buyers is a good scheme. And yes, as Suki says, there may be a glut of properties on the market to dump, but those people that dump that really need to stop and think about that. That's my view, is they need to stop and think that, don't panic sell, panic understand, panic realize what you've got, and recreate that wealth within your own portfolio. And your comment, Paul, in regards to the companies buying, well, companies, broader and bigger companies, household names that have gone off our high street, have now been rethinking about converting the assets that they've had, the big supermarkets that they've had, into potential homes to rent, because they too have also realized that, let's jump on the property ban because that's what everybody wants to do. And that will probably make it more difficult for house buyers, because they are going to do. But the good thing with that is that the smaller investor will probably rethink, because if these big companies do buy blocks and convert them and deal with them, then they're going to have the supply, and the smaller guy isn't. So the smaller guy is going to have to up his game, and the up in the game is providing quality over quantity. And if they provide a good, clean, well presented, well decorated, well manicured, well maintained property, their tenant is going to be far, far more interested in that.
Guy argues the opposite point to Suki, saying that higher tax on investment properties would just mean that landlords wouldn't sell, and that just reduces the stock levels, and that doesn't help anyone. It would also reduce the quality of the rental properties. That is something that we have done well with over the last few years, and surprising without the use of government legislation. So it's a difficult one for the government. Other comments coming in talking about the fact that Labour is really the area. I mean, we don't want to get too political about it, but talking about the mansion tax here. Here we are from Bob. Mansion tax is against Tory policy. This is a Labour tenant to bash the rich and successful. So the government has a tricky balance here, really, isn't it? He wants generation buy, doesn't want to upset enterprise. So it's a tricky balance for the Chancellor, isn't it?
Yeah, and as I said, and again, the Chancellor has a job to do. But I think if we all actually took guidance and advice from our two learned friends who are joining us today, you will see that there are many other routes to be able to, work your assets and deal with that more effectively than to panic sell or to panic buy. You have a smile. Obviously, I'm going to get a comment back.
Guy says, I started working in 1980, earning £40 a week. I remember those days of Knight Frank and Rutley, and we didn't deal with anything below 100,000. So Bob says, I still am on £40 a week. I think we'll get Guy and Bob to do the show. They're funnier than we are.
I'd love to have Guy on board, actually. Guy has a speciality in a subject that I've been longing to bring to the screen. So I can get him to wake up early enough, because he's in, I think, South Carolina. That's where he is.
Is he
Unless
now?
he's in the UK at the moment. I don't know.
Not doing bad on £40 a week, then, is he?
He's done all right, actually.
Anyway, we must move on, and thank you to everyone taking part. We love that opportunity to make it a discussion with everybody watching. That's the whole point, and that's the benefit of doing it through social media, is the fact that you can have that interactivity, which is great. It's not about having us talking at you all the time. It's great to have it as a full conversation between all those watching. So thank you for all your input. It's very, very welcome, whatever you wish to say. Just keep it clean. That's all I ask. I've got enough to contend with here without having to try and put a bleep in. Anyway, moving on to our third story, and I just thought this was rather interesting. So, the UK housing stock. So, if we added up the price, Joe, of all the houses in the UK, what would it come to? The answer is £7.56 trillion. And not surprisingly, this is carry on from Guy's comment about £100,000 houses. And so now it's 7.56 trillion. Not surprisingly, that's the highest there's ever been. And that's risen 380 billion from 2019 to 2020. And interesting, if you want to put that in perspective, it stands at 4 times the value of all the companies in the FTSE 100, which is quite something.
Here, here. That's all I say. It just endorses everything I say on this every Sunday morning. You know, the best investment that people ever make is their home. And you can't change that. It's not going to change. We're an island. We can't only go up and go down. We can't go out. So supply and demand always comes in, and people will continue to invest. And here are those statistics showing the confidence. And it goes back to the comment that I made earlier on, Paul. If the government or anybody else was come up with a safe and sound investment for some people to look at, then maybe some of those people will look at those other investment. But there isn't anything. And not only in the UK, Paul, but people from all over the world love the United Kingdom for its security, its safety, and its surety. You know, they know that it's in good hands. And everybody has their ups and downs in life, and the governments have theirs, and we all have our own, and families have theirs. But what is there is, when I look back at, you know, my little cottage, sometimes when I go there, that it's been there for 200 odd years, and it's likely to be there if I don't take it down for another 200 odd years. Primarily, you know, way past my sell-by date. So, you know, this is what property is about in the United Kingdom. That's why property matters, if you want to say that. And I think that's so yeah, it's great to see those statistics. It only endorses all of us and all the professionals that we have around us, that, you know, value is in your home.
Yeah, there's some interesting detail in there. The 380 billion increase is actually what we established a few weeks ago, which is that the market grew 6.9% last year. But the interesting detail is in the north of England, the northeast in particular, the highest growth in 1 year since 2005, which is quite something. But to counteract that, if you look at London and the southeast, that accounts for 41% of that 7.56 trillion. So if you look at it from a young person's point of view, you know, why would you try and struggle to get on the property ladder in the south when there's huge opportunities to go up north and really establish yourself and build yourself up and be a homeowner?
But it's happening now, Paul. It's happening more now than it ever has before. And that's why when you see the increases in percentage of property and the value and the return on their investment in the north is far greater than it has been in the south, though the south holds its own for other reasons. And young first-time buyers right now have a great opportunity of purchasing a property, you know, which is stamp duty free on a 95% mortgage at a lower price, in the north, or going towards the north, not necessarily far north. I mean, when I say north, we used to say going past Watford is north of England for us. So, and even if you just go past Watford, you know, Luton and some of those sort of other areas, house prices are good value for money. And once the H2S comes into play, which it will, maybe not quite in my time, because you never know when the time is up, but the reality is over the next 10 years, 15 years, when that does come through, those things are only going to become more accessible. And the change of the way we think in this last year is making people think, well, actually, I don't need to be, you know, in London or the outskirts. I need to go further out. And I think you'll find that drive is coming, and there will be more people looking towards the north side and accessibility. The government itself is making some really interesting inroads, isn't it? This government, they're moving some headquarters, some of the, you know, financial sectors and some policy centers and so forth. I think something was going in Wolverhampton, if I remember correctly. You know, they're trying to shift. BBC went up to Salford.
Yeah, I was going to say BBC. Yeah,
up in Manchester. You know, so there are small steps that would lead into, you know, sort of bigger giant steps when people actually move into those areas, because jobs. and the bright lights of any city, doesn't matter where you are, London, Paris, New York, all the new, cities will always attract young people because that's where they want to be. But once they settle, they sort of start to think about going back home, which is what my dad thought what he was going to do when he came in 1962. He thought, well, I'll go to from our village back in the Punjab to here in London, and thought I'll go back. The problem is he never left because the bright lights kept him here, and thank God, because that's how we ended up here. And that is the story in every home. We all go and make these plans. What do they say? It's an English saying. You probably know it better than I do. Best laid plans of men and mice.
Mice and men.
Mice and men. There you go. I knew I'd get it right. So we all have these ideas, don't we? And then you sort of think, okay, this is what's going to happen. But I think the opportunity is definitely there now for young first-time buyers. The window of opportunity is fantastic, and you should take it.
Yeah, there's some interesting notes there. Just one last comment on this: the number of mortgaged homes and occupied by the mortgagee past £2.5 trillion as a value. And that's been driven. This is the first time it's gone over that figure. And that's been driven, they estimate, by the Bank of Mum and Dad, longer term mortgages, Help to Buy, and of course also the mortgage guarantee scheme. So it does seem to all stack up that, everybody's desperately trying to get on that ladder. And that figure of first time buyers and owner occupiers is the highest it's ever been.
There's never been a better time to own a home. That's the way you got to look at this. The market is there, the opportunities are there, the government's supporting it, and the Bank of Mum and Dad, people have equity in it, and that also helps you deal with the forthcoming potential CGT. Because if you can realize some of that money that is sitting in your equity and share it with your children, then there's lesser amount to pay to the government in terms of CGT upon death and so forth. And it'd be good to have an advisor on board one of these days that we can discuss the ways and the means and the wills that are available for people to see how that can be done. I mean, I have some people that I speak to, and I'll try and get them on air to
good idea.
Give some ideas. But succession planning is a big failure in everybody. There is no plan, and we all think we're invincible and we're not going to die, and then it happens, and then all of a sudden that's when the government sits there with its hands, sort of palms well open, saying, well, bring it on. You didn't pay me during your time, and now it is. So I think all of those things are very, very important as part of Property Matters and the way we guide and show people. And in a layman term, that's part of the reason we do this. It's about understanding it as you and I would, as opposed to it being something that someone tells you that that's the way it is. It's just understanding that there are ways and means within the system that allows you to restructure your property or your finances and help the family in a nice way. And that will only fuel the market.
So Bob's saying he was going to see a property market correction in 2026. That's an interesting comment from Bob. This he's got prior information, perhaps. He says, then we'll see an annual growth year on year unless we see another pandemic or major world event which could precipitate such an event earlier. I wonder what's prompting the choice of 2026, but I guess there's got to be some kind of correction on the horizon at some point, Joe.
Every number of years, every so many years, there's always a correction. And the correction is created, but first of all, the inflation is created by the supply and demand. These are basic scenarios that will happen. And currently that supply and demand situation has been created by the pandemic. And the pandemic has made people think about how they deal with their lives, their life structure, and where they're going to be and what they want to do. And then as time settles down a little bit, as Bob says, maybe 2026, 2025, or he's probably got the crystal ball, knowing him. We should rename him from, Bob Singh to Mystic Meg or something. And but the answer is he's absolutely right that at some stage there will be a correction in the marketplace, and that correction will sort of slow down. And if I go back in my journey of 40 years, like Guy, you'll find that, not only were we paid 40 quid, but we were also buying houses for 40,000, 30,000 pounds. And then they went up to 600,000 pounds. And during that journey, there wasn't a reverse gear. There was always a correction. And I use that word correction very importantly, but the market uses it as house prices are falling. The two, they're different. The power of saying house prices are falling is actually sells more newspapers and sells more media, because people think, wow, I've got to go out there because house prices are falling. But the reality is it's not house prices that are falling. It is, there is a correction in the marketplace because the demand has created that increase, and the lack of supply. It's just normal statistics. But we all play on words. But I agree with Bob in this case that it is a correction, and there will be a correction as always, and it has been in those 40 years several times. It just goes back and says, right, this is the true value of this home. And it's the old story. If you haven't got enough buyers, sooner or later someone's got to be real and say, okay, if I'm not going to get £600,000 for this property, I mean, the best offer is £500,000. That doesn't mean these house prices are gone. It probably means that every other home in that road in a given time was sold for 600, but right now it's quiet. And if you want to shift it, you're going to have to, adjust your price in order to get rid of it. And the other thing that has to be taken into consideration is conditions. It's all very well saying that, but sometimes you're selling a property that has actually sold, and those statistics are there because it has needed everything doing to it. I mean, I went to a property this week in southeast London, Stratford, I think it was. What the picture showed on the data was not what the picture when I got there. It just knocked me out for six. It was just surprising. Worst house in the entire street. That then, when it sells and goes on the statistics, people will turn around and say, oh, well, look at that, house prices have probably fallen in that street. That's not true. It's only related to the condition of that property in the first place. It goes back to my comments week in, week out about making sure that you present your home the best way, because the best presented homes are going to get the best possible prices. And it's up to, but it's the circumstances. And I think there will be a correction. There always is a correction. And I think we just got to wait for that. And as time goes on, it will work.
Final story this morning, Joe. Yorkshire Building Society becomes the first lender to relaunch a 5% deposit mortgage. Obviously, we covered a lot of this with Bob last week. But basically, they've got a 5% deposit, loan to value 95%, with a 3.99% rate, a £995 fee, and a free standard valuation. It's not part of the government's guarantee scheme, only open to first-time buyers, whereas the government scheme is open to all home movers. You can get 4.49 times your income, up to a maximum of 500,000. But what was really interesting about this is that on the 1st of March this year, there were just 5 products on the market doing a 95% LTV. This time last year, on 1st of March in 2020, there were 391 products. So the market really did just contract, didn't it? And it's only seeming now just to start waking up, which seems a bit late considering as all this first-time buyer furore we're led to believe around stamp duty holidays.
I think there's the back end of that, Paul, is that the banks that have been reluctant in bringing that forward equally have a huge number of people that have actually for the last year probably not been in a position to pay their mortgages. So there is the flip side of that, and so they have a book value on properties that maybe are in arrears for more than 3-4 months, and that makes them stop and think about how they're going to do that going forward. So, and that hence why the government stepped in order to support that, because the banks have probably gone to them and said, look, you're telling us that we can't, instigate repossessions on properties that have fallen behind, the people that have lost their jobs, perhaps lost loved ones in the journey, had to restructure their own family. And those things have caused an inside issue, which obviously we don't see in the front line because that's not good news. The only time that will become good news is, and I say that in tongue in cheek, I'm not saying it's generally good news, but that's how news is. That bad news will become good news, and the bad news is going to be how many people are going to lose their home. That statistic hasn't even started because obviously the government has extended the time where people can actually be eviction times have been extended. So the courts are going to have a huge job where people and the banks are going to have a huge job trying to get some of their money back. I know that from some of my clients that I'm already dealing with, where the bridging finance has been taken and the people haven't been able to meet with their commitment. So, you know, I think there's a back end lash of that's going to come through, and so the government and the banks have had to sort of think about what it is. But as we come through and the government support comes through and gives confidence and comfort to people like the Yorkshire Building Society, I'm sure there will be other bigger brands that will start to come up with their own products, let alone the ones that have been supported by the government.
Bob's saying Bank of Ireland are also in the mix with that, and also there's 100% schemes, which I know he did mention last week. 100% schemes as well, where you can take in the property of the parents as security. We must move on because time is flying by. It's great to chat, but of course that does mean we get rid of all the time that we have together. So we need to talk about. You've been a busy boy this week, haven't you? Because you've been looking at your new property that you've got going on, which is the Crown Court development in Windsor. So I just wanted to see the pictures of the Fairview boards outside. That's what I wanted to see, and there they are. Look.
Well, you know, I just thought it was quite nice to get this finally. This is quite an interesting journey, actually, and it brings me on to probably the subject of the week that we will probably have to discuss today. And so this is a small boutique development which I've shared during our last programs. But yes, the flags went up, showstopper as they would be, and many clients are stopping and looking at it. So this was, if anybody knows it in the area, was the former Sebastopol pub on Clewer Hill Road. So that was knocked down. 9 flats were created, 9 individual flats, and you can see them playing on the screen. And our developers there have now put together a very nice boutique development. And Fairview International, which is our agency part of the business, are retained to dispose of the flats, which we've already got a couple of people this week that we launched on. And of course, next week is the show opening, which is from 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock next Saturday. So anybody else that's interested, call us and we'll book you a slot. Unfortunately, because of COVID, they have to be, you know, distance and so forth apart. Very important to have that on board. Just got to click my power in because, you know, you never know with this thing. You know, it's live. You know it's live. So that's very important. And that sort of brings me on to the subject really of the dream home, doesn't it? And you look at these things and you walk into a place that someone's actually put all the effort in, new kitchen, new bathroom, you know, underfloor heating, central heating, views of the castle, fitted wardrobes, whatever you want to call it. And many times people come to us and say, you know, I want to build my home. I want to buy a plot. And I want to deal with it the way I want to do. I want to design my own home. And that is such a big dream, isn't it, for people that we want to sort of say, I'd love to be able to do that. And we sold a property again this week in Chalfont St. Peter, a very nice plot, which is going to have just under 5,000 square foot house, a dream one. And I'll follow that through when that actually goes, just to share with all the people that we have that this is what people dream of. They want to plan and design and so forth. And what is now taken into consideration in thinking about the future and thinking about the type of things that people actually want to see in their home, the wish and the wants, the wish list, if you want to call it. I'd like this and I'd like that. And I think that's quite exciting to see. And it's quite a journey on its own that we will do. So, you know, there are opportunities from start to finish. I get calls from people that want, you know, buy a small plot of land that might have been a green belt because someone somewhere has been told that they can one day build a house on that. You know, what we deal with the real things, with the reality of something that's got planning, got the opportunities, got the things. And this was a great property, a landmark property in Clewer Hill, which was, you know, home to a lot of young people when they were young, growing up and having a few pints and hangouts. And it was taken down and a very nice little boutique of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments put up. And we're delighted to be part of the journey, and we'll be delighted to be part of anyone's journey from starting to finish. We have all the advisors, we have all the guidances from planners to financiers, of course, to buyers and to sellers. So if anyone has that dream, give me a call, and of course I'll be only too delighted to help you along that journey. But yes, anyone that's looking to do this, please give me a call, only 9, and I'm sure I'll have, next time you see the picture, Paul, you'll have sold, sold, sold on them, and rather than for sale, for sale, for sale.
Ah, no pressure there, eh? Fantastic. Yes. So that just give us that date again when the viewings are.
So next Saturday, the 27th, from 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock. Just give us a call. You can call me obviously on my mobile number, but you can call me on the landline number, and we'll fix the time for you to have a walk around and see. Great first time buyers, of course, stamp duty exempt, and of course 95% help to buy scheme mortgages. I'm sure Bob will be there to help us assist those people to buy when that's ready.
Indeed. Well, guys, come back and said yes, it would be fun to join in one Sunday from North Carolina. So I looked up the time difference very quickly while you were talking a moment ago, Joe, and he's 4 hours behind. So he's going to have to get up nice and early, as he's done this morning, because it was 6 o'clock when we started the show at 10 here. So he's going to have an early alarm call, does Guy, if he joins us, which would be lovely. So, yes, Guy, if you're prepared to get up that early in the morning, we'd love to have you join us one Sunday morning and get a perspective. And it will be interesting to hear about the international side of things and how things are in the States. I'm sure it's a fascinating discussion to have as well. So, Joe, I think we better wrap up. We've been rabbiting on for over 50 minutes already today, so it's probably a good time to say thank you to everybody who's joined us today, and also indeed to all of those who participated. That's what we've always, wanted for the show, isn't it, Joe? For people to come in and have a discussion and join us. It's not just about us two rabbiting on at people. It's about everyone getting involved and having a discussion about property and everything around it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Property Matters was always a subject and design program about discussing, the biggest subject that we have in our lives, which is property, apart from, of course, your family and so forth. But investment wise, home ownership, it is there. And that's the whole design. I'm really grateful to have, some nice comments and nice participation. And Guy has a speciality in a subject that I would love to bring to the screen with our people. And Guy, just message me or message Paul and tell us when you are available, and would love to have you join us one morning.
Indeed. And on that note, we'll say thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next Sunday morning.
Thank you.